if in doubt, go back to the old traditions. Like I said, this decentralized marketplace where everyone is hustling for attention, promising the radical new idea or the new cure, the new method, the new technique. Unfortunately, if someone sounds super, super certain they know what's going on, not just in this dimension, but in all like 5 dimensions, they're really, really very probably talking BS. If in doubt, go back to the old traditions like Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, go back to the old classics. The heart of spirituality is not like knowing more than someone else. It's just being kind.
My name is Francesca Phillips, and you're listening to the Good Space Podcast, a show where we help you find peace and power in work, relationships, and intuition. Welcome to the Good Space Podcast. Today, we are going to speak to an awesome person about conspirituality, which we've talked about before on a previous episode, and we're actually talking to like the expert. This is the person that inspired me to dive into this whole realm of mixing spirituality with conspiracy. Why does that happen? What's the nuances behind it? It's super, super interesting. And so today we're going to speak with Jules Evans, who's an honorary research fellow at the Center for the History of the Emotions at Queen Mary, University of London. He researches the history of ideas and how they can help us flourish today. His research has explored everything from the revival of Stoicism in modern life to the cultural history of ecstatic experiences. He is a co-organizer of the London Philosophy Club, the largest philosophy club in the UK, and he gives talks and workshops on practical philosophy around the world. Some of his books that he has written is called Philosophy for Life and Other Dangerous Situations, and then The Art of Losing Control, a philosopher's search for ecstatic experience. Jules, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Francesca.
We're so glad to talk to you. I've been so excited for this moment. Okay, so why don't we just start off first then with what inspired you to do the work you're doing right now?
I always wanted to be a writer since I was a teenager. Initially wanted to be a novelist or a poet, but I wasn't very good at that. So I got into nonfiction. I was inspired by kind of 60s literary nonfiction writers like Tom Wolfe and Hunter S. Thompson. So I call myself a gonzo philosopher. Hunter S. Thompson called himself a gonzo journalist, which meant he didn't just write about like Nixon or, sporting events. He put himself into the story through himself, you could say. So I kind of try to do that with ideas, not just write about them, but try them out, live them, see what they're like to actually follow. So not just write about ayahuasca or charismatic Christianity, but actually join a church or try ayahuasca, these kinds of things. So, and then I've written about spirituality, religion, philosophy, because I'm interested in ideas that can make people's lives better. I guess that's what motivates me. I've had experiences of kind of like mental health problems in my late teens and early 20s, and that very much shaped my kind of vocation, I guess. I realized how the mind could be, both like a heaven and a hell. I realized how unpleasant it is to experience like mental ill health, and how liberating it is when you work out how to kind of heal that. So that kind of, started me on this path.
What did it feel like when you finally felt like I am happier or I'm feeling better mentally? Like, what was it for you, do you think, that made that switch?
2 things. The first was like a near-death experience I had when I was 25, I think it was. I had a skiing accident. I fell off a cliff and had the classic cheesy white light experience of feeling like, you've ever heard of these kinds of things? Sometimes they happen to people on operating tables. This was like a skiing accident. I did, and I was just felt immersed in a white light and like filled with love. I'd had post-traumatic stress for 6 years where I'd felt basically broken. And in this near-death experience, I had a deep sense that I was okay and that there was something in us that can't be broken or damaged or taken away or lost. And I also had a sense that what had been causing my suffering for all these years was my beliefs, not my, broken neurochemistry, but my own thinking, which I could change. So that was incredibly liberating, like realizing, oh, I'm doing this to myself and I don't have to do that. I can change my thoughts. And the second thing that really helped me, that really backed that up, was Stoic philosophy. Ancient Greek philosophy, 2,000 years old. It's based on exactly that idea, that in the words of a Stoic philosopher called Epictetus, what causes people suffering is not events, but their opinion about events. So it's our own opinions, our own beliefs, our own interpretation that can make situations bearable or unbearable. So those two things showed me the incredible power of beliefs, opinions, and ideas, that they literally are the building blocks of our reality. But usually we're unconscious and unaware of the beliefs and opinions we hold. And that's why we get stuck in prisons. So we can use all kinds of methods to learn to examine our unexamined beliefs. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. From the very simple to the more advanced. And this can help us to really completely change our reality and to overcome even deeply ingrained problems.
I mean, through the work that I do as well, I see so many people who haven't had that awareness yet, or had that moment where they realize it's my thought or it's something else. Like, we're such on autopilot most of the time. And so it's really encouraging and inspiring to hear that you figured out, wait a second, if I just look at my beliefs or look at my thoughts and I can change those, then I can change a lot more in my life. I think that's really amazing. And there's so many other things I want to unpack, but I want to go back to when you said that you tried ayahuasca, you tried these interesting religions to go and actually see what it's like and then come back and write about it or say what your experience was. So how did you stay grounded after letting yourself go to all these different things? Is it because you know your beliefs and your values, or what did you do?
I mean, I got into Stoicism initially, and my first book was about Stoicism. I mean, I wasn't just being a tourist. I became a Stoic. I got a Stoic tattoo. It's still on my arm. I thought I was going to be a Stoic forever. So I helped to revive, Stoicism. I organized the first gathering of Stoics for 2,000 years. There's now a Stoicon every year. So I was part of that. And then what happens sometimes is you just kind of grow out of a philosophy a little bit. So I still love Stoicism, but I realized it wasn't enough. It was a bit too individualistic and a bit too rationalistic for me. So my second book, I started to look at how people can be healed by ecstatic experiences. I was aware that near-death experience I'd had was not me reasoning something out. It was something that happened to me. A powerful ecstatic experience that took me out of my normal self and connected me to something I don't fully understand. So when I was researching ecstatic experiences, I started off exploring Christianity first. And again, I went fully into it. I, converted to Christianity publicly, and then realized after a year and a half, I still can't believe this. And so that was an awkward kind of moment. So yeah, I try not to be too much of a tourist, just bouncing in and bouncing out. I'm properly, I'm seriously trying to kind of improve my life and improve myself, rather than just drifting down the spiritual buffet and trying a bit of this and trying a bit of that,
For sure. What do you feel like was the missing pieces in each of the things that you thought? I mean, obviously Stoicism, I felt the same way. It's too rational. I felt the exact same way. There are certain things that you can still glean from it that are good. But then even with Christianity and other things, is there something that you're you don't know what it is that you're waiting for? Or is it more just there's good in all bits of things that are out there?
I think that's right. I think I'm basically a pluralist. I don't necessarily think that one philosophy or religion has all the answers. I think they're all human-made, though possibly in encounter with something beyond the human, but they're still in human language, they're cultural forms, and they're imperfect and limited. And we're all, I guess, if you believe in God, when we're groping to something beyond us, but we can't really put it into words. So yeah, they often got something good in, but they've all got flaws and shadow sides. But I also think I was always looking for like my home, my tribe. And I was also looking in some ways to get back to like my happy-go-lucky, younger self. And so I was looking for that kind of total healing, total liberation kind of thing. And I would join a community or find a new method. And then, I'd realize it was flawed in some way. There was some kind of, inevitably the guru had some skeletons in their cupboard, that kind of thing. And I get disillusioned. And now I realize that I've stopped looking for like a home or a tribe, like a perfect family to join. Like in this life, I think everything is going to have some imperfections to it. And in a way, being mature spiritually is no longer looking for like the perfect family or the perfect guru or the philosophy that answers everything. It's coping with the realization that it's imperfect, but still going on, not getting too disillusioned, whereby you give it up entirely. And I feel like you started your podcast, was it January last year or some point last year?
Yeah, it was June last year.
June. So, I mean, what a time to start a podcast on spirituality, because what a year it's been for kind of spirituality. And I think for me and maybe you and some of your listeners, sometimes it's been a challenge not to be disillusioned and disheartened by what one sees happening in spiritual community, but to find that balance between like skepticism and hope.
Yes, 100%. And I really like how you, more or less, at least what I got from what you said, is that spirituality, it shouldn't rely on people so much because people are imperfect. And yet I feel like source, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, that is where the perfection lies. That is where we're still unfolding and discovering. And that's like almost our relationship with that is more important than people. Well, not more important, but.
Yeah, I don't know. I really see parallels between my relationships with people and my relationships with faiths and religion. Like, it's actually about not looking for perfection in the other person or like the one, and you're going to be on a complete spiritual high when you meet them permanently. And then when you get to like whatever month 6 and you're no longer on a high, you think, oh, well, this clearly isn't the one. So I'm going to break up and go on to the next thing. Instead, it's like, well, this is what it is. You get out what you put in. So in the same way, both in like relationships and in spirituality, we can expect it to be all like a high. And that happens to us rather than something we've got to put work into it. So I see similarities between me bouncing around and my struggles to commit to a particular philosophy or religion and my relationships with humans.
That's so funny. I love that. Hey, at least you're aware and you recognize what's going on. Okay, so this is probably a good segue then into conspirituality, which was a term that I had not heard before reading your article. I think actually Apple News flashed this article and someone quoted you. And when I heard some of the quotes, I was like, I have to read more of this guy's stuff. And so I just, for hours, was diving into everything. Because if someone listening hasn't listened to my previous episode or has no idea what we're talking about, I would love to hear from you. What's the concept of conspirituality if no one's heard it before?
It was a term coined a decade ago by 2 anthropologists. And it's basically the overlap between spirituality, like New Age spirituality, and conspiracy thinking. So it's conspirituality. So they noticed a decade ago, in some aspects of New Age culture, you had someone like David Icke, who is a well-known conspiracy theorist. He was a sports presenter on the BBC. And one day he announced that he was Jesus or the Messiah. He announced this on a chat show, poor guy, because he was having some kind of spiritual emergency. And the whole nation laughed at him, which must have been very traumatic for him. He then went away and became a complete conspiracy theorist. The reason the truth wasn't getting through was there was a diabolic plot. There was an evil cabal who were controlling all world events connected to the Rothschilds, obviously. And And then he upped the ante and decided actually they were lizards from another planet. And that's when he really became successful. But so he was an early example 10 years ago of how New Age thinking, that kind of ecstatic thinking, can get really paranoid and into this idea that actually the world is controlled by evil demons and so on. I only discovered that term in April of last year, when I saw in my kind of spiritual networks, this was in the first kind of, first month of lockdown, people were sharing completely far out conspiracy theories. Not just people, but like leaders, leading influencers in my networks, in kind of spiritual networks, which is like kind of plant medicine, energy healing, yoga, all that stuff. And they were sharing documentaries about Pizzagate and QAnon conspiracies. They were sharing interviews with David Icke. I was like, that guy, the guy who thinks the Queen of England is a lizard? Why are you sharing him? Like, people were sharing things like the virus was caused by 5G. Being vaccine hesitant is one thing, but this was like completely like vaccines are an evil plot by Bill Gates, who's a demon. And that was just the start of it. I mean, the Illuminati are controlling everything. And so I was like, what is going on? And I found this paper from 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, conspirituality, that's what's happening. And it got me thinking about why people in my culture, because I'm spiritual but not religious, why should we be prone to conspiracy thinking? What drives that overlap? Yeah, and I think there are various reasons. I mean, you could talk about psychological reasons, economic reasons, and cultural reasons. Psychological, people who are drawn to spirituality tend to be very independent thinking and very distrustful of like official sources, like official religions, official news, official all of that. That makes them prone to, much more drawn to things like alternative news, alternative medicine, alternative theories of reality. So that's one thing. Often people who are drawn to New Age spirituality like to think that they are special and different. So they can sometimes score a bit high in narcissism. Like, I'm not like those sheep who just believe whatever, or follow normal religions or believe the news. Likewise, conspiracy theorists score high on narcissism. So it's this feeling that you're in the know, you're one of the special ones who's tapped into the secret. You're awake and everyone else is asleep. Yeah, and there's also things like a tendency to see patterns in things. So like, if you have, this is not entirely a bad thing. It's a personality trait. It can be called like schizotypy, which sounds bad, but it's not necessarily. It means a capacity for unusual thinking, a capacity for altered states of consciousness, the capacity for like mythical thinking, the capacity to see unusual connections and patterns. All of that can make you an extremely creative person, an original thinker, but it can also make you prone to see, on hyperdrive, to see all kinds, like everything is connected. Like if you've ever had like an ecstatic experience or maybe a psychedelic trip, you know what that's like, where like, everything is meaningful. And that song on the radio, that's about me, and that, that advert, it's all connected, So you can see how that could make someone prone to a conspiracy theory in which everything is part of one grand plan. You could think of, a conspiracy theory in a way is like a bad trip where, it's all connected, it's all one, but it's all connected into an evil plot. So it's like if a good trip is like, oh, it's all connected, it's all one, and God is flowing through me and I'm empowered. That can slip into the bad trip version where it's all connected, it's all one, and they're all against me, and I'm at their mercy of these empowered others. This goes back to something called Gnosticism, which was an early kind of religious movement which arose at the same time as Christianity and side by side with it, and it kind of often overlaps with Christianity. And the Gnostics believe that we are divine, that we have the divine spark within us. They often believe that only certain special ones have the divine spark. So they're often quite elitist. Now, there are two moods in ancient Gnosticism. One is optimistic. I am realizing the divine within me. I am all-powered. I am the universe. I am liberated. But the other mood of Gnosticism is pessimistic, which is the Gnostics believed that this world, this reality, is controlled by evil demons, and that we're in a kind of fake reality. And these evil demons are trying to keep us asleep and stuck in this fake reality. And so maybe we have to, perhaps only a few of us will wake up and be liberated. The modern version of that is the idea that we're all being controlled and brainwashed by this small evil cabal of like the Illuminati or the Rothschilds or the Masons or, whatever. So it's that kind of pessimistic Gnosticism. It's a strong strain, and it's quite strong in American culture.
That's what's so interesting about everything you just said is that conspiracism. I mean, I read Matthew Remski's 3 Rules of Conspiracism, which on the surface are not bad things. And like you said, some of those qualities are not bad things on the surface. But what it sounds like is as soon as you add paranoia, as soon as you add the almost the negative spin to it, that's when it becomes harmful. Do you struggle with time management and feel overwhelmed by everything you have to get done? And have you tried sticking to a regular schedule but get pulled every which way by shiny objects and demands from others? If you want to simplify your life and get better at being decisive, finally getting productivity down in your life, then this message is for you. I have released a new book called How to Not Lose Your Shit, the ultimate productivity guide for entrepreneurs. This book gives all the methods that I have taught my private clients, my followers for many years on how to see results in your business and to get more peace in your life. I've had so many entrepreneurs say how overwhelmed they feel and drained and burned out. And so I teach them a framework and different techniques that help them to take back their peace and to start loving running their business again and to start feeling human again. If any of this sounds like you and any of it sounds good to you, then make sure you buy this book now. It is workbook style, so it's a roadmap, and it gives you a link as well to a download that you can easily print and use as you're implementing everything in the book. And it's very short. It's probably 60 to 70 pages. So it's very short because I only wanted to give you information that was actually useful to you. And I throw in a few stories as well from people that I've worked with. So a lot of good things in there. Make sure you buy it now if this sounds like something you need. And if you have any questions, feel free to direct message me or email me. And I hope it helps.
There are other reasons why conspirituality should have arisen at this particular moment, but maybe we can't go into all of them. But I think one of the particular reasons with spirituality is it's deinstitutionalized. So it's everyone just out there hustling for attention. And during the pandemic, when everyone was stuck at home online and felt afraid, a lot of spiritual influencers worked out that if they shared conspiracy stuff, don't you get a bad feeling about this lockdown? Don't you think this is a government plot? They would get a massive wave of kind of likes. So that's both incredibly gratifying and also monetizable. So it's partly about that. Plus, we also, had people in government offices encouraging these conspiracy theories. So that gave them great legitimacy. But to go back to your point, yeah, there is a value in conspiracy thinking. There's a individual social and political value to it. Sometimes it can be helpful to be paranoid. If Woodward and Bernstein hadn't been a little bit paranoid, they'd have never uncovered Watergate. There are such things as conspiracies, not just conspiracy theories, but conspiracies. Corporations do bad things and try and cover it up. Politicians do. So powerful celebrities carry on decades of abuse and use their money and power to cover it up. So this is true. This happens. when alarm bells should ring is if you have fitted everything that happens in reality into one map, one kind of plan or plot, and you say something like, this one group controls all global events, like then you are completely overestimating the competence of other people. Like that's not possible to control all global events. Like the closer you get to power, the more you realize it's just full of idiots messing up. It's more of a farce than a kind of, a thriller, unfortunately. The other thing that should get one's alarm bells ringing is if you're over trusting your own intuition, and if you're not really properly fact checking your beliefs or assumptions, and you're just making these leaps of, this fits and that fits and so on, then you can end up in pretty alternate realities. And unfortunately, you can go down rabbit holes these days, not necessarily because a cult leader is just, telling you the same thing over and over, but because of algorithms on things like YouTube. If you watch one QAnon video, YouTube will suggest another next time you come back, and another and another. These platforms just want to keep you watching. So they will reinforce whatever you're into. It's funny, isn't it? Whenever I go onto YouTube, it shows me the same clips from the same 5 comedies. I'm not that into them, but it's always what YouTube suggests. So I end up watching endless comedy clips from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's not even my favorite show, but it's just YouTube reinforcing this habit, So imagine if I was into QAnon videos, YouTube would just be constantly saying, hey, how about another QAnon video? So it's that. So there are useful conspiracies. There are true conspiracies, and conspiracy thinking is not all bad. I think it has been pretty harmful on the whole over the last 12 months. I think it's cost a lot of lives. I mean, let's be real about it. It's prevented people from getting vaccines, and some of those people have died, or they've passed on the virus and they have died. So it's also massively undermined trust in government. So liberal democracy looks weaker than any time I can remember in my life. You've got authoritarian, non-democratic governments putting money into helping spread conspiracy theories, like I'm talking about Russia and China, in the US and in Europe, because they want to weaken liberal democracy and our ability to kind of make sense of what's going on and react rationally to it. So you've got conspiracy theorists here in Britain, I meet them, who think President Putin is the great liberator. This is a bad situation for our cultures, and unfortunately for our societies. And our people are making it worse. They're good intentioned people who want to make the world better, and they're making it worse, and they're actually harming lives.
Yeah. And that's where it really becomes more of an issue for me, is the fact that it can harm lives, which, by the way, I'm sure you have so many raving haters that come after you. I'm assuming, right? You must have people who are triggered by what you're teaching, right? Or no?
No, I don't think so. I think they'd be so in their kind of bubbles that they were, they wouldn't really come across it. I mean, or I don't read the comments, if so, but I just think if you're a complete conspiracy theorist, you just watch other conspiracy theorists.
It's true. I feel like you're probably serving more the people that maybe are middle ground, or are unsure if they're doing the right thing, or they want to learn how to, they're already prone to wanting to learn how to find the right information, is my guess.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that I can warn about certain trends, just because someone sounds like a hippie, they may still be promoting really authoritarian, anti-democratic ideas. I wrote a piece in September called Nazi Hippies, trying to figure out why is there this overlap at the moment between wellness and far right conspiracy theories like QAnon, which calls for the overthrow of democracy, military tribunals, summary justice, people getting hung. Why are hippies getting into that? Like wellness hippies. And I kind of, made the point that if you look at the history of the New Age, particularly before World War II, it often overlapped with far-right authoritarianism and elitism. So, leading Nazis were very into alternative spirituality. Like the head of the SS would get his SS officers to practice yoga, and he carry around the Bhagavad Gita with him. And by saying that, I'm not saying, anyone into the New Age is a Nazi or a fascist. Definitely not. I'm into New Age spirituality. I'm just saying there are these tendencies and historical trends within our culture we should be aware of. We should be aware of this shadow side of our culture. It has in the past very much overlapped with authoritarianism, elitism, anti-Semitism. So don't be surprised if that sometimes happens again.
Yes. And that is exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because I feel like the lines can be blurred for some people. And I want to make it very clear that, yes, there is a shadow side to all things, but especially in the spiritual community. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it reminds me of people who join religions and they use that as a way to justify their perversion or the extremism that they experience or want to act out. So even though most religious communities would be like, oh, those are like fundamentalists or they're extremists, and that's not what we believe in, but they use what the religion believes in to justify their perversion.
100%. Well, that's spreading through our culture now. And so we should stand up to it and say, this is a dangerous conspiracy theory. And it's leading people to violence and to kind of to leading them to try and overthrow a democratic election. So we should stand up against that, like for the sake of our culture, and like confront our shadow, basically, rather than, let it harm society.
From right now moving forward, I don't want people to feel fear and trying to learn things in New Age or in spirituality that might help them, because maybe they're afraid to meet people like this or to confront conspiracy. So I know you've mentioned before balancing the Socratic and the ecstatic. So what tools or mindset should people have so that they can still enjoy the positive, good things about spirituality, but also being aware and having boundaries for these more darker areas?
Well, I think you can practice like mental hygiene. So intuition is incredibly powerful, but it's not infallible. So just because you really feel something doesn't mean it's definitely true. Yes, you can get, there are such things as like spiritual experiences, revelations, and so on, but we've always got to try and test them out as well with kind of critical thinking. If it really flies in the face of critical thinking, then, it can lead us astray. We're always going to be fallible. We're always going to be flawed. So try to look for the errors in your thinking. You can think in a way where you're just trying to defend your beliefs all the time. That does not help you to grow. Instead, occasionally look for what are the probable flaws in my thinking? What's holding me back? Because we'll all have just, don't cling to your beliefs. Hold them a bit lightly and be prepared to let them go if new evidence kind of comes in. I think community can really help us. I think when we're isolated, that can make us go down kind of fear and panic and stuff. So trying to find just a healthy community that can help us too. So I just think it's about kind of balancing reason and those aspects of life which is somewhat beyond reason. But that doesn't mean letting reason go. Like reason's got to be our kind of companion on this journey, and be very suspicious of simplistic answers. Anyone that says to you, there's about to be a great awakening any day and evil is going to be completely purged and love is going to completely triumph, they're probably trying to sell you something. It's like, these are like fraud schemes. They're like pyramid schemes. And people kind of cashed in on misplaced hope. There are things to be hopeful about, but it's not going to be just some overnight apocalypse. It's kind of the slow work of change, I guess.
It's so powerful. And I was just thinking the other day here in New York City, someone, no badge, nothing, stopped my husband and I and was trying to sell us this like crazy, like how you said, the end is coming. And she said that, oh, we're all here as punishment on earth and like all these weird things. And it was an interesting conversation, but those people are out there, and you're right. They're out there to capitalize on misplaced hope and your emotions and the unsurety some people have about their foundation or what I don't know, like what they believe, I guess. And so it's very crucial to, like you said, have that community. And that's what I'm hoping to provide with the Good Space is like, we have a Facebook group, we have all these other resources. So if you're like, I just want to put this out there. If you're feeling unsure, please reach out to me, please reach out in our community, reach out to Jules, like get his books, like get yourself in a good space, which is why we call it the Good Space, to be able to like give that support to yourself.
Last thing I thought of as well is like, if in doubt, go back to the old traditions. Like I said, this decentralized marketplace where everyone is hustling for attention, promising the radical new idea or the new cure, the new method, the new technique. Unfortunately, the more certain people sound in this decentralized marketplace, the more followers they get, the more books they sell. If someone sounds super, super certain they know what's going on, not just in this dimension, but in all like 5 dimensions, they're really, really very probably talking BS. It's just a really good like marketing strategy. So if in doubt, go back to the old traditions like Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, go back to the old classics. And you know, the heart of spirituality is not like knowing more than someone else. It's just being kind. Like that's the basics. So if we're in doubt, go back to the basics and go back to the classics.
I'm glad you brought that point up, because at the end of the day, and granted, obviously I'm saying this in a general way, there's so many nuances that we could get into, but if it's divisive, I always doubt it, because true love, true like spirituality it brings people together and it creates love and like those higher energy feelings. And if someone's trying to make you feel divisive, like QAnon, I'm like so shocked, because it's like, that's the most divisive way of thinking. Then you have to know that it's not from those better sources, if that makes sense. I would love to hear from you. Which book of yours is good for where someone's at? Like, should someone who's just dipping their toe into this read Philosophy for Life and Other Dangerous Situations?
If someone would like to discover how like ancient Greek philosophy is full of this kind of wisdom that we're often not aware of, how it's, got as wonderful wisdom as one finds in, say, kind of Buddhism, then I would recommend Philosophy for Life and Other Dangerous Situations. I think it's particularly helpful if you're going through a difficult time, because Stoicism is very good for difficult times. That's why it's called For Life and Other Dangerous Situations. So pretty good in a pandemic. And then I think The Art of Losing Control is if you're more like, you're not necessarily looking for immediate emergency tools, but you're more in a mode of like asking questions in which there might not be easy answers about the nature of ecstatic experiences, what you're connecting to, how we find them. So that book, The Art of Losing Control, is more of an open-ended journey and less of a kind of toolbox of practical methods. So it depends where you are. If you're in a like, give me some help right now, go to Philosophy for Life. If you're in a, I feel like, asking some difficult questions, then go to The Art of Losing Control.
That's great. And we'll make sure to link that in the show notes so you can easily click over and buy those and start reading them now. Before we go, I would love to know your thoughts on where do you hope that the spiritual community or spirituality in general goes from here? What result or outcome or change would you like to see?
Oh, that is a hard question, Francesca. I mean, I think things are going to get very interesting because psychedelic therapy looks like it's going to be legalized, and psychedelics decriminalized in New York, in Portland, or in Oregon, California, other places. That's going to be interesting. Suddenly, if kind of millions of people are having mystical experiences on psychedelics in a culture where I'm not totally sure we've got the cultural understanding for these experiences or how to like make sense of them or integrate them. So I'm both excited about it because I think it's going to very much open up people to spiritual worldviews, and a little bit concerned. I just hope people don't have experiences they can't make sense of or fit into their lives, their everyday 21st century lives. I also expect that as the climate crisis kind of gathers pace, it's going to be challenging because people will, their entrenched beliefs will be shaken. I just think it's going to be a difficult kind of 10, 20 years. And I think people will be very vulnerable to easy solutions and easy answers and kind of, apocalyptic, ecstatic forms of, politics that promise easy solutions or scapegoats. So I think if you're interested in like helping people, it's a very rich time, because I think people will really need help and support in the next kind of 20 years. And that could be like just providing, spiritual nourishment or connecting them to kind of the old, good ideas. Or it could just be trying to be kind to the people in your life or the people you come across. So in some ways you kind of be like, oh, we've been born into quite a difficult time, but it's a really good time if you want to practice being kind. Like it's a time when that kind of practice can really go a long way, because I think it'll be really needed in the next kind of 20 years.
I really felt just like a strong energy from what you were saying. So I know that that's true. And yeah, I really hope that we can continue to be voices or like landing places for people. And what you've been writing and just the work you're doing is so impactful and changes so many lives. It changed mine, and now it's going to change, other people who listen to this, and on and on. And it's so incredible. Is there one last thing you would want to leave with someone? If they take one thing away, what would you want that to be?
Well, I'm researching a British writer called Aldous Huxley at the moment, who wrote like the book, The Doors of Perception. And he went and moved to California, and he was a very smart man. He could memorize books, and he was a famous kind of intellectual. But he said at the end of his life, it's a little embarrassing that after 50 years of research, I don't have any better advice than to be a little kinder to one another. So I think that's pretty good advice.
I agree. Well, Jules, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you, Francesca.
Now it's time for an affirmation. I radiate with kindness no matter where I am or who I'm with. The energy around me rises with my presence. If you found today's tips inspiring or thought-provoking, share it right now on social media and make sure to tag me at Francesca A. Phillips or at Find Your Good Space, and also weigh in the comment section at findyourgoodspace.com. You can find links in the show notes. And if you have a spiritual or mindfulness problem that you want me to unpack on an upcoming The Good Space episode, or an awesome manifesting story you want to share, give my podcast phone line a ring right now at 917-719-0867. Also, don't forget to download my free morning routine guide. It's what helped me reduce my anxiety, increase productivity, and so much more. The link to everything I mentioned is in the show notes. See you soon.